as a Sandler trainer, my dad was a trainer. So I took this in high school. And in my 20s, I thought, coming out of college, I thought, I'm 22 years old. I can't go into a business owner's office and be like, here's what you should do with your sales team. You know, it's like, what do I know? I've never run a sales team. Well, it turns out most business owners haven't spent 6 years learning sales training or working with other companies that have a wide different experience. They only have their little niche of experience, and we all do. And so unfortunately, it wasn't until I turned 30 that I was like, oh, I can do this. Like I'm not going to be the business owner, but I can be a resource for business owners. And it clicked for me. So I wanted to ask you about these 7 weapons. When we think of behavior, the one that you sort of hit the most throughout the book and your story is this thrive or wither thing. And I think that's a lot of behavior for us, of how do we do the right thing at the right time? How do we lean into our strengths, and how do we maybe minimize, outsource, move away from things that cause us to shrink, wimp out, or wither? What are your thoughts on behavior when I say that word?
Well, first of all, everybody probably listening to this has done a strengths and weaknesses assessment. I would hope so. I would hope so. If you haven't, do. However, strengths and weaknesses is not going to cut it in really understanding where do you fit. And that question of where do I fit, that was a question that plagued me for freaking ever. Why? Because I'm trying to fit in somebody else's mold. And guess what? Most salespeople don't. And they don't fit the stereotype of, people that are non-salespeople think used car salesmen. No. They think, oh, well, all you do is talk all the time. Actually, the less you do, the better you do. So wrong.
Turns out the job is listening. Yeah,
exactly. So the Thrive Wither came out of necessity. I did my first turnaround when I was 28 years old, had no idea what I was doing, didn't feel qualified, but we turned it in a significant way. Wonderful. I catch my partner embezzling twice, 3.5 years later. That's a problem. That's a real problem, because my name was on the door, his name was on the door, and I have this choice of either have to destroy this man who is 20 years older than me. He actually graduated from Kansas State. I did not. I dropped out. And so, and everybody in town in Wichita, Kansas knew who he was, because he had been the head of corporate communications for Cessna Aircraft. Everybody in Wichita, Kansas knew this guy. Everybody in town pretty much knew who we were, because we had built this really cool 30-something back in the day. There was a television show, 30-something, and we built that kind of a firm. We did a old chili factory. We were the hip and happening place to be. Well, so my choice is I either destroy him or I destroy my name if I take the agency I built across the street and I don't out him. Good name is to be valued above great riches. So what am I going to do? And I was in a conundrum, because my mentor, who was one of the big hitters in the entire advertising world, a guy named Ron Anderson, he was up in Minneapolis, and he split time. He was the chief creative officer and vice chairman of Bozell Worldwide, big Interpublic group. I think they were Interpublic group. And so he split time between New York City and Minneapolis. And I confided in him after I discovered what happened. And he said, come to New York or be with me in Minneapolis. I couldn't do that, because in my Thrive Wither, one of the things that was really important to me was my family. And I could not see my family in New York City. And I also couldn't see them in Minneapolis, because my wife had a medical condition at the time that extreme cold would have really exacerbated. And so while my career was extremely important, these other things were far more important. I wanted balance. So we talked about balance earlier on. I wanted balance. And so I listed the stuff, and I was only 32 years old at the time, but I listed the stuff that made me come alive, the kind of environments, because I'd been around, I'd been working since I was 20. So I described for myself the kind of problems I like to solve, the kind of environments, the kind of people I like working with, the kind of issues I like dealing with. And then I also put in my wither column the stuff that just drained my tank. And here's the magic of that. Sometimes your strengths are actually in your wither column. Stuff that you are just burnt out, or you became proficient at it because you were told to, or for whatever reason you drove into.
You know what one was for me? I get bored with it. It's easy.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes, I do too. I like variety. So that variety is in my thrive column. Now, so I did it in necessity for me. And what happened is an open door happened for me here in Charlotte, North Carolina, halfway across the country. Never been to Charlotte. Like it. It's got trees and it's got more sunshine and it's got hills and it's closer to the ocean than Kansas. So like Nirvana is beautiful.